The 2026 MotoGP season has begun. It's the Tuesday after Valencia. We've had Hangover Day. We've had the end of the season. This is the actual proper end of term. We're giving you an extra bonus podcast, which is probably going to be filled with sketchy goodbyes because Simon and Val are in the Valencia press room as the MotoGP circus dissipates for the winter break. So expect, the odd glance away and the odd farewell. And what's your phrase, Simon? Light-hearted interruptions during the course of this podcast. And these guys, after their weeks on the road, about 28 weeks or something in a row for Simon, if not more, and like Val's expedition through the Valgarve to Valencia, can finally go home.
We should cut it here. That's
podcast done. Podcast done. But yeah, we had the Valencia test. Raul Fernandez was fastest. I doubt that'll mean much for next year, but an odd sort of day. Val, I'll let you go first and explain why it was an odd sort of day. I mean, this is always an odd sort of day because more often not, Maverick Vinales is fastest, but he was not on this occasion. He did all right, though, actually.
Yeah, just not fit enough to go fastest. I think he did give it a decent go, just not quite there yet physically to do his usual testing glory run to the full capacity of it. It was a very, very strange day to the point where sort of a bit of hope flickered in me, like 3 hours in that, nothing is going to happen. All of the sessions are going to be cancelled. So I have to be honest, by that point in the day, I was over MotoGP 2025 and not yet ready to start MotoGP 2026. So I was like, you know what?
I'm still there. I'm still in that place.
I am also still in that place, but it's like...
That's why I've got to bring the excitement. I'm in 2026 feverish expectation.
But also because this is just, if you look at the weather conditions around, I realize if you're watching this on video, I look like on a ludicrous green screen, but this is actually the real media center background. Like actual real, I can go touch it. I won't, but I can.
I can see you in the distance.
Yes.
So I vouch for it. Like I can just about see your head.
This is brutal track temperature to start the day, like something like 13, 14 degrees of track temp for the first couple of hours, which you cannot do with the Michelin tires or with just a lot of racing. Yeah. It's not really necessarily a Michelin issue, and obviously the track's still damp because when we were coming back from the track on Monday, where we did nothing much at the track, but that's besides the point. We're coming back, it was really poured down. It was really, really pouring down. And so the first 3 hours, there was sort of nothing. And then a red flag for some very not limp, I don't know, maybe they worked, attempts to dry the track. Just not very high tech necessarily, just sort of people showing up with blowers or whatever, or other kind of tools that are kitchen even roll. More primitive. Yeah,
like
exactly.
Kitchen roll, like blue roll.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe it doesn't look very professional.
Maybe it worked because then soon enough after the red flag, we got a day of fairly consistent running and a decent amount of laps and reasonable lap times and some genuine takeaways, as many as there were going to be today. Nobody's taking any super important decisions about 2026 on the basis of one day at Valencia with track temp at 17, 18 degrees. It's not going to be the case. Also, I don't know if this is part of it, but after 22 rounds and two manufacturers having had relatively massive freedom to develop, other manufacturers also, apart from Ducati, making big changes to their bike after 22 rounds, you're not going to get a massive 26 prototype influx here. That's just how it is. We've done enough improvement and upgrading this season to save the big stuff for Sepang next year.
I think we're not going to talk too much about Honda today, so I'm just going to throw it in here now that Joan Mir said in his debrief tonight that they had very little actual new stuff to test, but that wasn't a complaint because Honda have brought them so much new stuff during the season that it's got to this point in the year and it's kind of natural that they're now starting to think about production for next year. And it's like the least unhappy I've ever heard a rider who didn't have new stuff to test at an end of season test.
The Yamaha V4 is even not a massive novelty at this point. The riders who spoke about it, the riders who had sampled it before were like, this is kind of really close to the Misano package. So like the big stuff it's Sepang time. So in terms of 2026 prototypes, wasn't a huge deal of stuff going on. This is obviously nothing like what the madness of next year is going to be.
It was fundamentally a day to gather data to to tune next year's final packages rather than anything else. This is just to inform the engineers.
Fabio Di Giannantonio put it into really good words, or he kind of did, where I sort of navigated him that way, but correlation work. Like, that's exactly what he describes. It's just genuinely not wind tunnel correlation necessarily, although who knows, maybe, but just, correlation works, verifying that the stuff aligns.
For one manufacturer, it was kind of wind tunnel correlation.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get onto them a little bit later. I think you're talking about the slightly camo thing that was on track during the day. Yeah, it's a different vibe to the old days in that, like we've said so much this season, these bikes are now iterative. Bits of them starts turning up at the private tests, even at the races as well. It's not like a boom, here's the new thing you didn't see coming. Maybe a little bit more of that when we get to Sepang in February. Also, this test has been the one to look forward to so often because it's the first chance to see Rider X on bike Y. Last 2 years, we've had Marc Marquez on a Ducati, then Marc Marquez on a better Ducati. That's been the excitement. It is worth listening to the rest of this podcast. We do have more things to say. It sounds like I'm saying no one that brings new bikes to this test anymore. There's no big rider switches, but it's not like the kind of bang, there's so much to learn from this test that often Valencia Tuesday has been. But it's still that, like you say, there's enough going on, and there's enough people who had weird years and need to do something different next year that this was quite an important day one of sorting themselves out. Get onto the main one of those a bit later. The big new person in a new place storyline, though, was the first chance for you guys to see Toprak Razgatlioglu on a MotoGP bike. He's done the private test, but this was the World Superbike god coming to MotoGP properly. How did he get on?
Quite well, by every account, by every account from basically everybody who spoke or mentioned, which does not include Toprak for obvious reasons. For those unfamiliar, Toprak is still contractually a BMW rider until, I presume, just the end of the year, until 31st of December, because that's normally how those contracts work. So he had to get dispensation from BMW to start testing in preparation for his Yamaha MotoGP move. And whenever that dispensation is granted, it is always granted with the proviso: do not speak to the media in any way, shape, or form as the ambassador of your new employer or whatever. Don't speak about the bike. Don't speak about anything. You're still a BMW man. You're still, your checks are being cut by BMW, so you do not represent anybody else as it stands, which, totally fair. We're completely used to it. Not a problem at all. Pramac did bring over team manager Gino Borsoi, who acknowledged and confirmed the general feeling that this seemed to go quite well, that the adaptation maybe looks a little smoother right now than expected, although obviously it'll be the final bit of it. That'll be the hardest part. But he specifically said that the team was surprised by how easy certain things were coming, in particular in terms of the big question, which is the braking style versus, the World Superbike Pirellis versus the MotoGP Michelins, what they can take, how you need to treat them coming into the corner. We heard Fabio Quartararo mention, although I think he's only basing that from the lap times because it was a very busy day, so there's no way he's looked at any data, but he said basically that he now has higher expectations for Toprak's season, that he now thinks Toprak will do better than he thought before Toprak would do. Alex Rins did say that they did throw 2 soft tires on it to get a decent lap time out of there, and it is important to mention that if you're comparing him to the other rookies that we'll get onto, this is not Toprak's first or second MotoGP test.
Yeah.
Even he's done this before, and very recently he's already ridden the V4 for a limited amount of laps as part of the preparation for this test. So he was well set up to go well here, but he went well. And that's interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of, I think, the day I expected him to have, where it was pretty steady. We know that the other guys are doing a hell of a lot of work, development work, and I kind of, someone asked this morning what I thought about where the 2 rookies would figure, and I had kind of said that I thought maybe Moreira would be higher in the standings, but that Toprak would be closer to the other Yamahas. And at least half of that was right, where he was pretty close to them.
It was ahead it was second best Yamaha on the time. 7/10 gap to Quartararo, but I feel like Quartararo's had that sort of margin over his stablemates a lot. Yeah. Obviously not complete, like you say, more new soft tires involved, not completely representative. But when you look at Toprak ahead of Alex Rins and Jack Miller on the times, that's not nothing, is it?
It's not nothing, but it's not everything. Also, it's way too early to draw any sort of conclusion as to how they stack up. I didn't hear from Miller, but I'm pretty sure Rins didn't do anything soft tire related or try anything. And he sounded quite happy about the day. If he legitimately had a day where he was being legitimately like beaten by the new guy, he would have been the face of depression. That was absolutely not the case. It's in fact probably the happiest I've heard Alex Rins sound or seen Alex Rins sound in any of the sessions I've done with him this season, which has been quite a few, because he tends to overlap with other sessions. So honestly, there's been a lot of kind of not one-to-ones, but pretty close. Like I feel like I've spoken to Alex Rins despite not doing that many of the rounds, a representative amount this season.
That's a bit sad though, isn't it? Because Val, as you confessed on maybe one of the in-car podcasts that we did in the Race Members Club, you go to the people who are the not lower priority, but Simon takes this is definitely a big name who we need for something once when there's a clash, and you take the ones who are like, how do I fit them in the bottom 12 of my rider rankings, people? So if Alex Rins has been on the Val list all year.
Well, sometimes it also just depends on the general positioning of the two of us relative to because today's setup was quite an unusual
Today
one.
was definitely like that, because today was complete and utter chaos.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a mess.
The pictures these guys were sending over of the setup and where they were as they slowly froze, waiting for some riders who may or may not appear, did not look like.
There's very close by. There was a dumpster with a broken bicycle. I just imagine the phrase like, "All right, now we start." Moreira in English next to the dumpster with the bicycle. I was like, I love that.
Someone did reply to me whenever I posted it on social media to say that for all of the many complaints that there might be about Liberty, that they can't imagine anyone from Liberty has ever said, Sir Lewis is next to the recycling bins.
I just got stuck on a completely tangential memory of one of our old colleagues somewhere else interviewing a prominent Formula E driver next to a massive number of recycling bins during the launch of the indoor London XL track. Most of the video footage of that particular launch featured a prominent Formula E race winner standing among the recycling. That memory threw me for a sec.
My favourite temperature line from the debriefs was Jack Miller turned up and someone said, "Hey, how are you boys?" And someone said, "Cold." And he went, "Yeah, it could be worse. Could be a Michelin front tyre today."
Speaking of Jack,
summed up why we didn't ride much in the morning.
Yeah. Speaking of Jack, let's just go back to where Toprak is in the times, because I was looking at this order and this positions. You'd hope they'd all want to be further up than 15th, 18th, 19th, 20th. But if like halfway through the season, Toprak is in that second Yamaha group and Quartararo is a chunk ahead, is that kind of where we expect? Is that what Toprak will be content with in year one? Or
it's good.
That would be really good.
Yeah.
That would be better than my expectations, to be honest.
Because I would say that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I just wonder if Team Toprak would see that as
anything.
Good as
Team Toprak will. Team Toprak fan base might not.
Yeah.
Two very different things.
Yeah, indeed. We've been saying Val particularly for, I don't know, 6 months or something. Pecco Bagnaia just needs to get to the Tuesday after Valencia, get the nightmare of 2025, the bike spec that he's never really got on with apart from briefly at Motegi when it was the greatest thing in the universe for him, and just get to this day and try something different. Val, was this day transformative for Pecco Bagnaia?
Val particularly, I disagree with there. I don't think
I reckon we could. I'll
send
some AI to check this out, and then we'll report back and go, yeah, it was Val.
Okay, fair enough. If the AI says so, then I mean the AI knows. But yeah, no, it was not transformative, but he did sound quite content and happy. Not just content with the fact that the sort of the on-track portion of the year is finally over, but whatever it is they had on the bike, and it's not entirely clear because I don't think he meant the aero work that's going on. I think he meant something internal, or what he just basically described as the work that's going on for 2026. I mean, he sounded more convinced of the front feeling on it. He sounded like he was going to go for a pretty great time attack in the end there, and was convinced he was going to do a really, really good, impressive lap time to end the year on the high note. Then he crashed, but he didn't seem too bothered by that. I'm not sure anybody else crashed today. Pecco might have been the one.
Lots of technical problems, lots of technical DNFs, breakdowns, but I don't think any other faller.
But transformative, no, but it makes sense to me after. It's just this test is difficult to take too seriously as a sign of anything. I've increasingly found year after year, and especially after a year like this, it feels like whatever performance trend you might try to discern from it, whatever happiness or sadness you might try to find in it, it doesn't then survive the first contact at Sepang even. It's just, it's one day with some vague stuff that, you just need to sort of point to a vague direction with, or just check that it doesn't fall off the bike in questionable conditions at a track that isn't ideal for testing certain bits of the bike. So no, it was not transformative, but he doesn't. It's less that he needed it to be transformative or whatever. It's more than he needed the year to be over, and the transformative part will be going off to do something else for a couple of months. Genuinely, I mean, that's kind of the important part of it, and then coming back and seeing what really 2025 was about, how much the spiraling was just the intense rush of the 22 rounds, that increasingly you have to show up in front of the media and be sad and talk about bad performance and feel bad about how your two championships are being devalued a little bit. I should say that, but yeah.
You can say that. I don't think that
but I shouldn't. I can, but I shouldn't. There's a difference between you can say it and you should say it, and it's an important difference.
I would really, really love to know what Pecco was riding today.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what the bike spec was, and we will never know, essentially. But I'd be really interested to get a read on things a little bit better by knowing that. We know that there was a bit of a weird mix of bikes floating around today, because it sounds like Alex Marquez, Pecco kind of alluded to being on like a GP25 or GP26 preview, which I think is what Alex Marquez was riding as well. I'd imagine it was at least one of Nicola Bulliga's bikes, but then Fermin Aldeguer was riding his own GP24, not the GP25 that he's riding next year, but one of them had the GP25 aero on it.
Right.
Same as Alex Marquez ran this weekend. Yeah. So it was all a bit kind of all over the place, the Ducati specs. And yeah, not really much read into what anyone was on. But like I said, it would be interesting to know what Pecco was riding.
Bulliga's lap time, his headline one, 8th place, a couple of places ahead of Bagnaia, whatever package he was on. Like I said, Toprak's time being among the other regular Yamahas was not nothing. Bulliga being 8th. I know obviously he's had a whole weekend on a MotoGP bike at the circuit, but that was one of the most eye-catching things on the kind of headline timesheet for me.
Real good advertisement for hiring him in 27. Like that's as good a CV line as you could hope for, on top of a decent weekend anyway.
I think just the one soft tire from what I remember him saying, which again, there were a lot of people in quick succession in interesting conditions with bins nearby that were distracting with their content. So, but yeah, no, it looked good. A lot of people noticed. I mean, there's a difference between noticing it by saying like, oh, he finished ahead of Bagnaia, which absolutely 100,000 million% does not matter in this test. I'd like to make that clear. When you have a new rider in who has had recent race experience on the bike, who isn't really supposed to do like massive menial development work, who still needs to develop himself as a MotoGP rider, they're going to be allowed to express their pace a little bit more. And also, Pecco crashed when going for a glory run, but also it's just. It's more that this very good lap time. It was a very good lap time in a vacuum. It is a very good lap time if you compare it to Bulliga himself in the weekend. It's just good. It's impressive.
There was a few crashes or near crashes. Fermin Aldeguer had like the closest, probably the biggest save I've seen in a very, very long time towards the end of the day. And the problem that everyone kind of came dependent on was just temperatures really, really dropping and big parts of the track being in shade.
Yeah,
which
sense.
Then threw it even colder. So I think that's probably the source of that. Nicola Bulliga actually did his debrief pressed up against the stairs into the truck where they do the broadcasting interview. And as Pecco was coming in to do his TV interview, he stopped and whispered something in Bulliga's ear that like paused the debrief for giggles. Whatever was said. So it's all quite relaxed inside Ducati tonight. That much I'll say.
No, that is lovely. It just took me back seeing Bulliga's lap time to your very first feedback from the first Portimao Friday session, Val. That was when Bulliga was at his most headline time impressive relative to Bagnaia during this stint, I think. but just you came back from trackside going, he just looked like it could be another MotoGP rider straight away. And I think that is so encouraging. And encouraging for Toprak as well. Okay, Toprak is more embedded in the superbike world. Superbike tyres, Buliga is a more recent convert to that and is came back to a slightly familiar world in MotoGP. But yeah, 2 good adverts for World Superbike crossovers over the last couple of weeks, definitely. You said, Val, this test doesn't really mean anything, doesn't give you any reads on stuff. Wasn't Alex Marquez fastest at this test last year?
Yeah, but it
was in Barcelona.
Yeah, okay.
Which is Alex Marquez country.
Tracks. Yeah.
But also it's that kind of sometimes just reflects who has total spec continuity or like a very refined bike. If
the guy who was fastest today is the guy who didn't change bikes.
Ralph Fernandez.
Yeah. Ralph Fernandez did not have much new to try or at all anything potentially. So
while we talk about Raul, let's just talk about what Aprilia was doing with the other bikes. Although Fernandez had continuity, Marco Bezzecchi was probably trying out the most eye-catchingly different new stuff. The kind of camouflaged wings got a bit of attention, but Simon, you don't think that's the most interesting part about the new Aprilia?
Not at all. The side pods are far, far more interesting because they're they're essentially their 2027 aero, I think.
Okay.
Because they're like 50% the width of the current ones. The bike is so much skinnier, and you had to go behind the bike and look forward at the bike from the rear to really get an understanding of just how different it was. And then they're so much narrower, and that we know that that's part of the new rule set, isn't it? That the aero is going to become smaller, that it's going to become more compressed, but. Even immediately, if they've been able to, I'd imagine the process has been something like, we should start working on the 850 aero. It has to be narrower, we'll make it narrower. Then someone has done some sort of witchcraft inside that has created the same level of ground effect. And obviously, the narrower your bike, the less drag it creates, so the faster it is.
Yeah.
So they've just went, you know what, this looks really good. Let's just go with this right now. They did a few other bits of aero work that essentially are KTM knockoffs. The new front wing is a very KTM knockoffy thing, and at the end of the day, they ditched all the fins on the seat unit and put on a KTM style, originally a Yamaha style, like F1 spoiler.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of aero work going on there, but. I mean, it's obviously working pretty well. Bezzecchi was really happy with it, and no real negatives highlighted from it, which is what you want, right? Faster, but not feeling any different.
Yeah, and then coming in from the end of the season Aprilia had, you'd think there'd be maybe not a temptation, but in that sort of direction to go, great, this is working, just iterate and continue. Yeah, just no one's going to be pushing too hard on this rule spec with the carryover of regulations and quite a lot of bike as well. But if that's a kind of 27 hybrid that is developing for the 27 rules but being legal for 26 and performative for 26, that is a pretty awesome compromise to have come up with. Was Martin running any of that, or just Bez?
Wasn't he? Yeah,
at the very end, yeah. But most of the work that he did today was working on the new frame that the other guys got like 5 or 6 rounds ago that came in his absence, basically.
Yeah.
And is a whole lot better, but needs a kind of a new base setting work. So he's been working on it mainly today.
With that degree of iteration through the year, is there a little bit of a risk? We've talked a lot about how, again, Jorge Martin, like Pecco Bagnaia, but for totally different reasons, needs to get this year done and start afresh. Is it that comes across like he'll still be playing catch up at the start of next year? Sure,
but that's what preseason is for. I mean, no, I agree, but you get the reset of the off season. I mean, we have slash testing, but there's still a fair amount of testing. So catch up in terms of spec to me is less important for a rider like that than just catch up in terms of like feeling like a top level MotoGP rider again, instead of a guy who keeps coming back from injury and then trying to do too much too soon, as he himself admitted, and crashing, hurting himself again, and then restarting the process.
He admitted today that he's got a big mental shift to make because he spent all weekend riding as if he couldn't crash.
Yeah.
And this is kind of we've hinted at this before, that actually he's been quite a different character recently, where you feel like the old Jorge Lorenzo the old Jorge Martin would never have kind of openly said, without being prompted by anyone, I was mentally a bit weak this weekend.
The old Jorge Lorenzo would definitely not have said that either. You're absolutely right.
No, and that is exactly what he said today. Like someone asked him, I asked him, that's how long a day it's been, about his physical condition, and then he was like, but also mental. So, yeah, that's pretty mature.
Yeah. No, the worry there is anytime he did something in this comeback that looked like he was kind of riding with the old Martin energy, it ended with him ploughing into his teammate and injuring himself again. So, yeah.
But that's only this comeback. There's been quite a few this year.
Yeah, true. As someone who is a big admirer of what an on-form Jorge Martin brings to a MotoGP fight at the front, I would really, really like him to have a chilled, mentally resetting winter, a smooth preseason, and just be in this storyline, because with the Aprilia getting this good, Bears getting this good, Ducati in the position it's in, chucking a properly fit, head-on, bones all fixed together Martin into that is just a lovely thought.
Completely off topic, but you've just made me think of it by saying what he needs in winter. The best piece of advice that the media was given today came from Pedro Acosta, who told us to be bad boys over winter because he's going to be a bad boy over winter.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, it means he wants us to be police officers, like in the franchise, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith.
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
I think it probably means that he's going to have a few beers in the next few weeks.
I was going to say, if Pedro Acosta is encouraging you guys to miss deadlines, I'm not impressed.
No, I think it's probably a few beers and a few burgers. The things that MotoGP riders don't do during the season. I think that's probably Pedro's definition of being bad.
If you're in the Race Members Club and you listened to the Monday in-car podcast that we did when these guys were heading back from the circuit, you'll get excellent insight into MotoGP riders' drinking habits and alcohol tolerance. We're keeping this mini bonus podcast quite tight because Val has not eaten since he left Portugal or something like that. And he's got to go and forage in the bins, I guess, around the back of the truck.
Yeah, at least he knows where they are.
Yeah, that's true.
My BMI is listed as underweight. So,
well, I'm not surprised you're about 9 feet tall. Of course it's going to
be. He knows this. Why do you know this, Val? Why do you know what your BMI is?
I don't remember. It was too long ago, but there was a reason. Because we were looking up MotoGP rider BMIs.
We were putting MotoGP riders into a BMI calculator because we thought they might be underweight.
Yeah.
I bet they were.
They weren't. They were healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. Who was it?
Fabio Di Giannantonio. Because it said 177 height and 62 kilograms weight, which to me felt quite a significant swing.
Yeah. But it makes him just inside the healthy margin.
I assume that almost every professional sports person is probably medically slightly underweight, and it's not ideal. Maybe with the exception of Danny Pedrosa, because height-wise, it would probably work out just fine being that compact.
There's this weird thing with BMI where...
it's bad.
Like it doesn't. Yeah, it is bad, and it doesn't quite track. And there's lots of professional rugby players who are morbidly obese.
Oh wow!
Because it doesn't factor in muscle versus fat. It just factors in body weight.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a real. So there's certain people that you just can't use it on.
Did Bez's haircut during the year make a massive difference to how he measured on this as well? Can you imagine that?
Probably, though it's slowly going back. Like it's becoming quite mullety again.
Nice. Let's finish off talking about the other rookies. We talked about Toprak Razgatlioglu. The other newcomer was Moto2 champion Diogo Moreira, who was having his first taste of the Honda MotoGP bike, having replaced Somkiat Chantra at LCR. Moreira is kind of where you expect the totally inexperienced rookie to be. Bottom of the timesheets, what's that? 1.8 seconds off the pace. Not horrendous, but how was his vibe today? How was his day?
Well, I have to, we're cribbing this anecdote from an existing MotoGP World Feed interview, but Lucio Cecchinello came in and was asked what was his first reaction, and he quoted it verbatim as, Lucio, I shit in my pants, which is a very, very nice way of...
endear yourself to new mechanics.
Yeah. Well,
it's because it was so fast. Yeah, I think the full quote was, the bike is so fast, I shit in my pants.
Exactly.
I don't think I don't think Diogo actually crapped his pants. Like I don't think it was meant to be taken that way. And honestly,
because he only had one of those lovely sets of new leathers.
That was I found the way that was phrased specifically and introduced really, really funny. But also, I do think that motorsport talks way too much about both feces and testicles. Very, very much. This is sort of a PSA. Generally,
I'm with you on that. Yeah,
like every commentator must say "Code Brown moment" 500 times. Don't say it. It hasn't been funny since like the 1980s at this point.
Yeah, adults don't do that, and bravery is not measured in testicles.
Yeah,
it's 2025. Let's crack on with less of both those things. But anyway, apart from Moreira, basically Moreira was finding the jump to MotoGP big, which is we will talk at some point in the winter about how the route to MotoGP compared to the way F1 kind of brings drivers into F1 teams in a more gradual way. The route to MotoGP is a big kind of whoa, and now you're chucked onto this enormously fast bike with this team that you don't really know yet. But considering that, look, a decent day.
There was a little bit of actually insight on that today, where both Moreira and Celestino Vietti, who ended up riding Franco Morbidelli's bike, said that actually the Moto2 Triumph at least forces you to have the same riding style as he found he needed for the MotoGP bike.
And interesting.
That actually it kind of felt quite natural riding a MotoGP bike. He also said that despite having so much more power, the carbon brakes are also have so much more power that you basically use the same braking markers.
Oh, wow. So it kind of evens itself out.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time, clearly we can see from the lap time what a long time it is. And for Moreira, there's just, in terms of competitiveness, mentally throw this out. Forget about this lap time. Forget about today, whatever. Again, it's basically half a day on a super cold track. He didn't crash.
Yeah.
It's fine. I genuinely like the postseason test in terms of rookie eval. Just feels bad. Just feels bad as a marker, as a reference of any kind. Yeah, it's fine. Did fine.
The thing was, though, you talked about how Moreira was kind of equating the step, and Vietti, we'll talk about Vietti in a second, was kind of equating the step. Moreira was replacing Chantra because Chantra never got his head around the step and what was required physically, application-wise, everything around. But obviously, Chantra was not coming up as Moto2 champion. Chantra was a guy who was kind of up and down, but talented in Moto2. So for Moreira to come and kind of look like he belongs here is fine for right now, I'd say, isn't it?
I mean, what we also know, and the way sort of people in the paddock talk about it, is Chantra was given up on very quickly as a project, and Diogo Moreira will not face that problem. He has zero risk of that happening. So, and I mean, he's earned the contract and he's earned the trust. And at some point in the offseason, we're going to talk about this year's Moto2 and Moto3 season and what an incredible late season run Diogo Moreira had.
Yeah, that will be a special in the Race Members Club when these guys get completely unleashed on Moto2 and Moto3. And we'll do another one of those about the 2015 Moto2 and Moto3 seasons as well to end our 2015 series. Simon banked a fantastic little 2015 bonus today with a little exclusive chat about 2015 with one of its most contentious protagonists, which will also be out in a Race Members Club special in early December.
And he was properly contentious.
Yes, he was.
He was outspoken.
You've never heard Mike DiMeglio like this, ever.
So you can look forward to that. Keep an eye out for that in the Race Members Club. Come join us there if you're not part of it already. We'll finish off with today's random, a complete wildcard, who we did not expect to be on a MotoGP bike this time yesterday. Celestino Vietti. I know loads of you who are listening to this follow Moto2, Moto3 avidly and will know everything that Val is about to say. But for the benefit of the audience who are kind of Premier class only, tell us about Vietti, Val, and his kind of why he's not been on the cusp of a MotoGP ride kind of recently, but he's a name who's been kind of mentioned and highly rated for a long time.
The latest rider on the VR46 conveyor belt, but sort of the room to remove packages off that belt has basically run out. Like, they've already packed MotoGP with as many VR46 riders as are going to be, with Franco Morbidelli the obvious candidate to sort of make way for somebody like Celestino Vietti. Vietti just shows enough, which he hasn't quite in, I think, 4 years in Moto2, I believe. He's a bit underrated now at this point, I would say, because the fact that he's still been able to win occasionally in a very hard category there was he was very briefly a title contender at the start of his second season. I always thought that was a bit of a just mirage circumstantial, and it didn't hold up through the year, but he never took that next step. However, this year is hard to gauge massively because he was in the factory Boscoscuro team basically, and Boscoscuro is one of the two main chassis makers in Moto2 with Calix, and they had a down year. They had a sort of year of coming back down to earth after winning the championship with Ayagura last year. They were not as competitive as the Calixes. So the only reasonable really point of comparison for Vietti for the season is against the other Boscos on the grid. He was quite a bit behind Jake Dixon, who was quite good in the point standings. He was ahead of everybody else. I honestly, like, if you put him on a MotoGP bike and into a MotoGP season, I have very little doubt he'd do a fine job. You just there's no big impetus to do it as it stands. Did fine today. He's just one of those guys who end up underrated because the kind of the next step hasn't come. The run of like 5 consecutive races where you go, whoa, just hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean he's bad. Just how it is. It's a hard category.
The thing for me, I mean, there's literally a Celestino Vietti crashes meme. And that's kind of fundamentally like he would be higher in every point standing if he didn't crash as much, because he's clearly very quick and very talented. And I think that works against it because he has a reputation as a crasher because it happens so much.
Yeah.
And he like Joan Mir's his way out of high profile situations quite frequently. I will say, Val, one tiny correction. He's not the latest rider or the last rider in the VR46 pipeline. That would be Marco Gabberini, son of Pecco Bagnaia's crew chief Christian. Yeah, but he's not yet reached the Grand Prix paddock. But he's the next one down the pecking order.
Which in itself is mad, and an indictment of what we've said so much about how this is the VR46 era tailing off. Rossi's done his thing. A couple of years ago, the VR46 pipeline, you could see 5 or 6 riders, in the Grand Prix paddock. One of the very first,
like Nicolo Bulliga.
Absolutely. One of the very first features I commissioned you for here when we first started working together was ranking the VR46 proteges for Rossiness. That's way back in the race archive from like February 2020. Pecco's in there, Bez is in there.
But I think Bez was the most Rossi, which has stood the test of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it does show, and when we say that Rossi is kind of done with VR46, to relatively speaking, that's not saying how dare he, the job is done. He's contributed plenty there. That's absolutely fine. The only thing I just want to chuck in on Vietti, I think partly this is an era where 4 years in Moto2 doesn't mean you're never going to go out of Moto2. Ayagura actually spent quite a long time in Moto2 relatively in the end. But so much is judged on how your first year Moto2 goes. And if you make that instant splash, if you come up quickly, that carries so much weight. So I do feel like you've got to do something exceptional once you've been 4 years in Moto2. But I was like, part of me this morning was thinking, they didn't need to run him today, did they? Like, really, were they learning that much important stuff with their bikes back today? They had to run Frankie Morbidelli's bike, or could they have just let Digia get on with it? To me, the fact they put him out at all,
they learned nothing. It was a thank you present. Yeah. The same as another MotoGP debutant is going to get in 12 hours time, because Sunday's Moto2 race winner Izan Guevara is going to get to ride a V4 Yamaha tomorrow.
Oh, nice! You've broken that news to me during this recording, so I didn't realise that. That's cool.
I should say, I just looked it up. It is 5 seasons now for Vietti in Moto2, which is honest. That's more than 4, basic math, but it's considerably more than 4 somehow, despite only being one more than 4. And I think with Agura, I mean, Agura's 4 seasons, but he could have, if he wanted to, he could have moved up after 2. He just decided to stick around and refine himself. Vietti's, it is a different case.
Yeah. I'm going to let you guys go and find some food in Val's case, some sleep in Simon's case, because that was a big yawn just then. But fair enough. It's been a long season. It also feels like it's gone a little bit quick. It doesn't feel like that long ago that we were going, oh, Marquez Brothers won too.
Wow,
that feels like it
do
might
not
hold.
Share that sentiment even a little bit.
I'm not saying it hasn't been a long season since. I'm just saying like that feels a little bit recent. Thank you for your company, Race Members Club. Podcast listeners, Val, Simon, we'll be back probably next week with another one talking about a topic we haven't thought of yet, because right now these guys need to get home and get some sleep.